Speaking of marijuana, is marijuana legalization inevitable in the U.S.? What do you think? Let's watch this. Let's watch this video.
Has a complicated history in the United States.
It is only through enlightenment that this scourge can be wiped out.
They both smoke pot. That's jive talk for marijuana.
Does the Green New Deal mean free college for all? It's not part of the Green New Deal.
Minimum of 50 years.
Someone caught even with a small amount can be sent to prison.
President Carter today came out for an end to all federal criminal penalties for the possession of up to 1 ounce of marijuana.
Marijuana could very well be one of the most dangerous threats to an entire generation of Americans of any drug that we know.
Ronald Reagan was a fucking ghoul. Boomers, man!
Experimented with marijuana a time or two, and I didn't like it, and didn't inhale, and never tried it again.
Sentiment about cannabis in the U.S. is tied up in feelings about public health, race, crime, and morality. And that complicated relationship makes the rapid change in public sentiment toward decriminalizing and legalizing the drug even more surprising. Every ballot initiative involving the decriminalization or legalization of marijuana passed in the 2020 election. Voters in New Jersey, Arizona, and South Dakota chose to legalize marijuana for adult recreational use. South Dakota and Mississippi voted to legalize medical marijuana use. That means 15 states along.
I mean, look at this! And Joe Biden wouldn't even come out and platform it, and it's getting legalized all over the fucking place! In Montana, for fuck's sake! By the way, we had a Montana Senate race. Joe Biden could have come out in favor of it. We lost that Senate race. At the same time, people were voting to legalize marijuana. We lost a motherfucking Senate race. The Democrats are paid to lose, man.
Along with the District of Columbia, have legalized marijuana for adult recreational use, and 36 states and DC permit medical use of the drug. Now, a third of the country lives in a state where medical marijuana is legal, with 8 Republican senators representing legal cannabis states. Additionally, the Democratic-controlled House of Representatives just passed the Marijuana Opportunity Reinvestment and Expungement Act, or the MORE Act. The bill would legalize marijuana at the federal level and implement sweeping regulations and reforms surrounding the drug. The 2020 election and the House vote reveal something important about the shift in the marijuana debate. Marijuana
Rose Luna Shadow, thanks for the tier 1. Welcome back. Zactor too, thanks for the tier 1 as well.
In the United States right now.
Okay. Alerts? There you go. Thank you.
As of Montana, the legal weed is the only good part of our recent elections, and the new governor hates weed, so it probably won't last.
Well, Zactor, my guess is that the Democratic candidates didn't run on the weed issue because they're fucking idiots. Actually, did you guys just... I thought you guys had a Democratic governor. I have to go look at the governor races. I didn't care enough this time around.
With 91% of Americans saying it should be legal for medical use, including nearly
91% of Americans think it should be legal for medical use and 60% for recreational use, and we're not running on that.
and 10 Americans favoring legalization for both medical and recreational use. Despite the long road marijuana has had in the U.S.,
cannabis?
legalization advocates think
but...
the government may be on its way to descheduling the drug after 50 years of it being criminalized at the federal level. Here's how the U.S. ended up with the web of contradictory marijuana policy, and where the law might be headed from here. There has been a lengthy history of cannabis in the United States that has generally followed two tracks, medical and recreational. By the late 1800s, there were a wide number of medicinal uses for cannabis. People used it as a pain reliever, to treat nausea, and even to soothe the gums of teething babies.
Its role as a recreational substance is about 120 years old, when migrants fleeing the dictatorship of Porfirio Diaz in Mexico came to the U.S. and started settling along the U.S.-Mexico border.
The migrants were able to recognize cannabis's use as a recreational substance, which was very different than how Americans had been using it.
What do I think of Lee Carter running for governor? I think Lee Carter is biting off more than he can chew. That's what I think. But I support him. I just don't understand how he could possibly compete in a statewide election. But I believe in it. I believe it. I just think that it's like when people told me Nina Turner should run for president. I'm like, no, She should not. She should run for Congress. And Nina Turner ran for Congress. I'd love to see Lee Carter run for something that's a little bit more achievable from a delegate seat. But because he doesn't have that huge support, institutional support behind him. But maybe I'll be wrong. I mean, I just don't want him to Joshua for Congress himself, you know? With Terry running, he's got no chance. Yeah.
Drug.
And of course, this becomes immediately an issue because it is a minority population that is currently being demonized.
During this period, nearly every state
I think it's good. I think it's good for this purpose. Like, if he's running for the purpose of advancing his statewide name recognition for the long haul, yes. As long as he still runs for, like, his state delegate seat, yes. If he actually thinks he's going to win, I mean, he's got to pretend like he's going to win when he runs. But, like, if he, in his heart of heart, thinks he's going to win, like, yikes. You know? Like, if it's a messaging campaign, I 100% think that's good. As long as he's not abandoning his delegate seat.
The Mississippi River passed anti-marijuana legislation, and by
he's running for both. Okay, then I'm 100% behind it. Then then I love it. I love it. As long as he's not giving up his delegate seat.
1933, about 30 states had outlawed marijuana for non-medical use. Congress passed the first federal law that addressed recreational marijuana use in 1937, called the Marijuana Tax Act. It didn't specifically outlaw cannabis. Instead, it required anyone who grew, distributed, or used marijuana to register with the federal government and pay a small tax.
What essentially that allowed the federal government to do was to collect the names and identifying information of everyone who is involved in the cannabis trade, making it easier to keep an eye on them and essentially allow the government to survey their activities.
In the 1940s, World War II made hemp patriotic. The military needed it to create rope and other useful materials. With the end of the war, measures to crack down on weed ramped up again, and with the counterculture of the 60s, it became a symbol of protest. When Richard Nixon entered the Oval Office in 1969, he made drug prohibition one of his main priorities, culminating in the Controlled Substances Act of 1970, which created a scheduling system for drugs. The system is based on two criteria: the drug's medicinal value and the drug's potential for abuse. Schedule 1 drugs are considered to have no medical value and high potential for abuse. The legislation gave the control of determining which Schedule drugs should fall under to Nixon's Attorney General John Mitchell, rather than to a doctor such as the Surgeon General.
When Nixon and Mitchell, both of whom were adamantly opposed to marijuana use because they saw it tied to the counterculture, the civil rights movement.
Actually, they are being too gentle. They're being too gentle. Wow. They wanted to specifically target black people and anti-war activists and anti-war campaigners. That was the goal of it. Like, they outright were trying to attack those movements, and they used marijuana as an excuse.
Movement and the uprisings of the
they
60s,
literally admitted it. Exactly.
When they tried to put cannabis into Schedule 1, they had a hard time convincing Congress that that was where it should go.
In order to reach an agreement with Congress, they said they would form a commission to study marijuana in the U.S. Nixon and Mitchell subsequently classified marijuana as a Schedule 1 drug, alongside heroin, LSD, and ecstasy, while the commission, which came to be known as the Schaefer Commission, set about studying marijuana. The report ended up contradicting that decision, determining after a 2-year examination of marijuana users that the drug did not cause the concerned side effects such as a lack of motivation or increased aggression. Nixon refused to accept these findings and kept marijuana classified as a Schedule 1 drug. But the commission's report didn't go unnoticed. It became available to the public, and many activists took it upon themselves to work to decriminalize the drug at the state level. Between 1973 and 1978, a dozen states across the country decriminalized marijuana, essentially making possession of up to an ounce of cannabis the equivalent of a parking violation. But the decriminalization came to a crashing halt in 1978 when concerned parents began pushing back.
As decriminalization spread across the country, so too did additional industries that aided in the consumption of this decriminalized drug, which was paraphernalia, magazines, movies, music. So a lot of the products were available to children, and that was the crux of the problem.
In the late 90s, public
Come
sentiment...
Come on.
Surrounding marijuana use began to turn. In 1996, California became the first state to legalize cannabis for medical use. And in 2012, Colorado and Washington became the first states to legalize marijuana for adult recreational use. 15 states and DC have followed suit since then, culminating in the major wins for the pro-legalization movement in 2020. The conflict between federal and state laws posed challenges to cannabis businesses operating legally at the state level. One of the biggest issues for businesses is a lack of access to banking services, as well as the inability to get loans. Anyone running a legal cannabis business according to state law is still considered a criminal at the federal level. That means banks, including state-chartered ones, are at risk of federal regulators deciding that the financial institutions are violating money laundering laws. This means multi-million-dollar businesses have to function largely as cash-only enterprises. A big shift for the cannabis.
Do you understand how easy it is to vet? Like, I'm surprised there isn't more like heists against legal, like the cannabis industry in states where it's legal, quite frankly. Because they're all with cash.
Cannabis industry came when the Justice Department in 2013 issued what is referred to as the Cole Memorandum. The memorandum provided a set of criteria for states operating recreational and medical cannabis programs, such as preventing diversion to the black market and protecting minors and other vulnerable populations from accessing cannabis products. The Department of Justice had a policy that if states could meet these standards, it would not enforce federal marijuana law in those states. In January 2018, Attorney General Jeff Sessions,
they get robbed all the time?
Donald Trump's administration.
So it's just not a national story, because here in Pennsylvania, it's not legal. It's not legal in PA, so I don't know about that stuff. John Fetterman. Hey, did I tell you this guy named John Fetterman is trying to get weed legalized in PA? Did I mention John Fetterman is fucking awesome?
Rescinded the Cole Memorandum.
After the rescission of the Cole Memorandum, every single U.S. attorney in each...
Nobody complimented me on my shirt. Nobody complimented me on my shirt. No one. The fuck?
State actually still abided by that same criteria that was included in the Cole Memorandum because it was good policy and it made sense. And it just wasn't feasible to enforce federal law in the way that anyone in the Trump administration had threatened.
Where did I get this shirt? Ilhan Omar's congressional campaign. This is official Ilhan Omar. By the way, this is
from Pittsburgh.
This is the best print I've ever gotten on a political shirt. Like, this print is super high quality. It's not like doing that thing where it chips or like cracks or anything. It's super pog. I wish you could buy it, you know?
To do.
The Criminal Research Center found, after analyzing data from the FBI, that 4 in 10 U.S. drug arrests in 2018 were for marijuana offenses.
Only 6% for meth. That also, like...
A 2020 ACLU analysis of FBI crime data found that despite an increasing number of states legalizing or decriminalizing marijuana, law enforcement made at least 500,000 marijuana arrests in 2018.
Cut the Mic says, this coming term, SCOTUS will legalize warrantless home entry by cops if they are in hot pursuit of a misdemeanor, smoking a joint outside your house, and you run inside. Cops can follow you. Cut the Mic, you really think so? Man, I guess with Scalia dead, that's probably gonna happen, huh?
More than for any other drug. The report also found that Black Americans were nearly 4 times more likely.
Oh, hey, what do you know, chat? Huh. See, Black and white Americans use marijuana at the same rate. What do you know, chat? What do you know?
Than white Americans to be arrested for marijuana possession, despite the two groups using the drug at the same rates. Between 2010 and 2018, marijuana arrests in the United States trended downward slightly, but rebounded at several points.
They rebounded in 2016. That's weird. That's before Trump was elected. I wonder why that was.
The national downward trend appears to have leveled off.
I'll take a look at that. Cut the Mic. Put it in the Discord chat. Put it in the Discord.
Marijuana has increased. Maritza Perez is the National Affairs Director for the Drug Policy Alliance, a nonprofit that advocates for complete legalization of marijuana.
It continues to be one of the main drivers of drug arrest, marijuana possession that is, and marijuana use. It continues to be a driver of deportations. It's a major criminal.
I've read that marijuana has a derogatory connotation. It's better to say cannabis. That's true, but at this point, like, I think the derogatory connotation has been defeated by like the popularity of cannabis. You know what I mean?
Justice issue that really has lifelong consequences for people with convictions.
But some have expressed concerns around legalization for recreational use. Kevin Sabet is the president and CEO of Smart Approaches to Marijuana, a nonprofit organization that opposes the commercialization and non-medical legalization of marijuana.
So I think there's been a false dichotomy over the last 20 or 30 years that pits legalization against incarceration or the war on drugs, as if those are the only two options we have for drug policy or for marijuana policy. And I think the reality is there are far more innovative, cost-effective, interesting policies that frankly are much more in the middle and don't fall into the trappings of either, criminalizing, especially certain groups that are disproportionately affected, or on the other hand, glamorizing, normalizing, and commercializing today's very high potent marijuana, sold by big tobacco and big alcohol and big pharma. And we all sort of know how that movie ends with those industries. Why would we want to have marijuana follow the same suit?
We think that in order to really have a framework around drug policy that's built in equity, you need to account for the legalization component, because legalization often means that you're regulating the drug. So decrim is great, it's a start, but I think full legalization is really how we get at issues surrounding equity.
I personally believe our goal should be to discourage use, not encourage use. It's hard to discourage use if there's a pot shop on every corner and selling really nicely looking glamorous items that promise the world in terms of how they make.
Would this freak say the same thing about alcohol? Like, there's bars everywhere. What?
Make you feel, etc. I think people need to realize that the interest that big tobacco and big alcohol have in the marijuana industry. This isn't about Cheech and Chong or mom and pop stores. This is about a major industry that is being taken over by.
Okay, I agree with this. We need to make sure that these evil corporations can't take it over. That's true. And it should be co-ops. It should be worker owned. We should be doing socialism through marijuana. Absolutely. I agree with that.
And by the tobacco industry. So I just don't see how
Bernie had a plan to make sure it doesn't become like big tobacco. I know.
These big interests
I know
take
he
over.
did.
The needle has moved enough on public opinion that the House of Representatives made the historic move toward legalizing marijuana at the federal level with the passage of the MORE Act. The MORE Act would not only remove marijuana from the list of controlled substances, but would also address criminal justice reform by allowing the expungement and resentencing of marijuana convictions. The legislation would also tax the marijuana industry in order to fund social programs that would invest resources into communities that have been most impacted by marijuana prohibition. And the taxes would also provide support to underrepresented communities trying to enter the cannabis industry. Even if marijuana legalization and decriminalization seem like bipartisan issues at the ballot box, Republican and Democratic lawmakers in Washington still seem far apart on the issue.
You can grow it in your closet, too hard to monopolize? Wrong. They'll make it very cheap and very potent. You're telling me, like, do you make your own pizza, dude? If you order takeout, then you would order fucking monopolized weed. Come on, man.
Act passed in the House along party lines, with 5 Republicans voting in favor of the bill and 6 Democrats voting against it.
It would be cheaper to buy than to grow.
To me, I don't really take that as an indicator of, Republicans being against the policy itself. I think a lot of them behind closed doors will say that they think that we need to legalize marijuana.
I think the problem with many Republicans in terms of the MORE Act specifically, they are reluctant to impose a 5% and then 8% tax. And then there are various aspects of the bill that they would want to amend because it provides too much regulatory oversight by the federal government.
The MORE Act couldn't be passed during the regular session of Congress because it's so controversial. So it was passed during the lame duck session, but I don't really see this as having much momentum going forward with the new Congress. There are still many Democrats that are uneasy with the idea of the MORE Act. And I think there are ways where we can decriminalize marijuana without opening up what the MORE Act would do, which is create a new, huge for-profit industry. It was pure, unadulterated for-profit, really irresponsible and reckless full legalization of high THC products. So I don't really see it going forward further than it already has.
The MORE Act is not expected to be taken up by the Senate this term, but Perez still thinks the passage of the bill in the House sets a precedent for policy advocacy going forward.
We knew that this would, there's no way that this was going to go through the Senate this year, but that wasn't the goal. The goal was to have a marker bill where the House of Representatives had to take a vote on this issue, and we can see where they landed. Also, we wanted to just let it be known that if it's not the MORE Act, if it's less than that, it's just not a marijuana bill that Congress should be wasting their time on.
President-elect Joe Biden and Vice President-elect Kamala Harris might disagree on marijuana policy. Biden has said that he is in favor of decriminalizing the drug and has embraced legalization for medical use. He has not come out in favor of legalizing marijuana for adult recreational use at the federal level and prefers to reschedule the drug rather than descheduling it entirely. Harris, however, sponsored the MORE Act in the Senate and has taken a much more progressive stance on marijuana legalization.
When Joe Biden picked Kamala Harris, I know that he knew what she stands for. He strategically made that pick because I think that he feels like he has a lot of work to do, at least on the criminal justice end, given his background on those issues, because I do think that she could perhaps push him on this issue, if not at least begin to educate him.
He clearly compromised that position when he picked up Kamala Harris. I mean, it's so funny. Kamala, excuse me. What happened to White Castle? It's still alive and well, baby. People are still stuck in the 90s. Dare videos saying that weed is a gateway drug and makes you hallucinate. Oh my God. Biden picked Kamala because she's a woman and non-white. True. And the thing about her is she's such a careerist that she's just totally shut up about everything. Here's the thing about weed. For some people, weed is not their bag. For some people, alcohol is not good for them. That's the way it is. For some people, eating too much bacon or sweets is bad for them. But what we have to recognize in society is that a prohibitionist mentality is not the right one. We need to have a common sense public health philosophy where we look at the costs and benefits and we try to maximize what's good about these things and minimize the harms. I'm diabetic, banned all candy and sugar. Yeah, exactly.